fairly short period of time. There was a great Boulder study done where they took people who had had back pain for 10 years or more. 75% of them in 1 month had zero back pain by just learning these somatic practices and having an education that it's not the tissue is not the issue. It is stunning. Migraines are something. IBS, long COVID, they're talking about could be a mind-body connection.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you for being here. I'm super pumped about this conversation, mostly because I think this topic is so incredibly important and poorly understood. Just to be clear, the topic I'm talking about here is pain and its relation to either physical or mental in how it's perceived. Right? A lot of people think if I smash my thumb with a hammer, I feel pain, and that pain lives in my thumb. I'm thinking you would tell me that's not necessarily always the case with pain. Is that correct?
No, it's true. And there are times where our brain can actually trick us into feeling pain because of a neural pathway that's been made. And the pain is real. So I don't want anyone to walk away and be like, oh, she's telling me my pain's not real. But the pain can be very real, but it's created in your brain, and it's not necessarily a physical tissue issue, as they say. So we have to make sure we understand, first of all, rule out when pain is created by physical tissue. We 100% need to, check, is there a fracture? Is there an infection? Is there nerve damage? There are definitely ways, and we need help and treatment for that. But there are times when our brain is being naughty. It's trying to keep us safe, but it's creating pain, and the tissue is not the issue. So, we've probably all seen those videos where, there's the fake hand and they can trick you into thinking that hammer has hit it. So that's our brain. It's trying to protect us, but it's having difficulty, processing.
So let's just take a step back for a second. How would you define pain? What is pain?
Yeah, so pain can come in many forms. So there is like physical tissue pain that we need to tend to, but there's also our brain can create pain, and that can also manifest in our body. So a lot of people don't realize I can make a reaction in you just from a thought that I plant in your head. I can start talking about lemons and squeezing a lemon and smelling a lemon and, oh, how sour it is. And just because you've had the experience of a lemon, you can start to feel a sensation here, and you can start to salivate. So we also have those circumstances where we're nervous to give a talk, and then we start to feel butterflies. Some people may actually be physically ill before playing a sporting event, or going to give a talk. That is a thought, and the fear of not doing well or not performing brings up a physical reaction in us. So we have to understand. And then we also know about emotional pain, so anxiety, stress, depression, and that is all at an all-time high. And a lot of that can be those neural circuits that we have made this neural pathway, and then we just keep going back to it again and again. And it's hard. We have to learn how can we rewire our brain out of that so that we can get back to a place of calm and ease.
So what I'm hearing you say is pain is sort of an alarm system for something going on in the body, whether that's physical or emotional. Something is out of alignment, and pain is your body's way of saying, hey, something needs to be fixed or addressed. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And there are some doctors who will say that physical pain that is created is actually a way to distract from deep pain that we, in our subconscious, that we just don't even want to look at and we don't want to delve into. So let me create this little distraction over here to keep you from looking at what you absolutely need to look at.
So a lot of people want to be comfortable, right? It's our desire to remain in a state of comfort. So is it the case where someone's going to create, it sounds crazy, someone's going to create some physical discomfort, some physical pain, because that physical pain is less uncomfortable than dealing with the emotional pain that's underneath?
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. And it's completely, obviously unconscious. It's not intentional. It's not on purpose. And it can be to a point of real agony and disruption to people's lives. And if you ask them, is there any magic wand you could wave to get rid of this? Would you wave it? They would say yes, 100%. But the brain is working in a way that's thinking, I'm going to protect you by not having to go there. So we're going to deal over here with this. And unfortunately, then, we go to a million different doctors and practitioners, and all of them, 99% of them, reaffirm our belief that it's the physical. And so then we chase down looking for the wrong cure. And until we start to realize actually all injuries heal, and that injury was a long time ago, why am I still feeling that pain 6 months later, 12 months later? And then we start to have to unpack, are there triggers or relationships? Like we realize, I'm starting to feel my carpal tunnelitis Sunday night before I go to work on Monday morning. But when I'm actually doing something I really enjoy, like maybe knitting with my knitting group or something, I'm using my hands, but I'm not feeling that pain. So we also have to start to unpack, are there times when we get lost in our joy, that pain is gone now. So it's something that we really need to look and unpack.
Yeah, that is a interesting phenomenon, because as you mentioned that, I'm thinking about there are some scenarios where I'll have an experience of pain, but then I was under the impression I got distracted doing something else that I enjoy, and you don't think about the pain. But perhaps that was wrong, where it's more like you said, kind of the reaction to, hey, this pain is not present because you're doing a thing that brings you joy, not discomfort.
Yeah. And there are times where we can start to look at, I've like take people with back pain. About 88% of all back pain is not due to a physical tissue issue. So if that's 88%, then you think the other small percent is from a physical issue that needs to be addressed. But then when does that back pain come and go? And what is it that triggers it? Some people will say, it's when I'm standing. If I'm sitting, I'm fine. And then the other group will say, when I'm sitting, I'm in so much pain, I have to be standing. But if you take them to a sporting event where they're watching and they're excited and they're lost and they've been sitting for a long time, they may realize, my pain is gone. And is it just because you've gotten distracted? Or is it because your brain is no longer in a fear state and it's no longer sensing the sensations and sending a message to you that you're in danger? You're in danger and I need to keep you safe. So that's something that, we need to unpack. And then once you start to realize that, if it is indeed a mind-body syndrome, then it's just a matter of rewiring or retraining the brain away from pain. And that is incredible and life-changing for so many people. If you can go from a state where your life gets so small, if you have had pain, you do know that your life can get really small and enveloped with it. And so then you start to expand that out and start to, work fun back into your life and some relaxation and ease.
Yeah, which sounds simple in terms of like, hey, it's essentially a learned behavior, so just learn a new one, right? The concept seems pretty simple. Obviously, a lot harder to implement because you have to unlearn everything you've learned. I'm thinking about, there are some of these scenarios where if you experience back pain and you believe, hey, it only happens when I sit, so I need to stand more. And then you keep telling yourself that story. And hey, again, let's assume it's not a tissue issue for a second, but this is a emotional pain. If you continue to tell yourself that story, hey, this is the thing that resolves it, and you get deeper and deeper into learning that sort of scenario that you created in your head with how you solve the pain, you now, I think a lot of people get into the scenario where rather than treat the actual issue, which, we can go off into a tangent there because there's obviously not a lot of people who, when you go to a doctor, they're going to tell you, hey, it might not be a tissue issue, it might be X, Y, and Z. It's not in the books as much as it should be. But they tend to take some Tylenol to reduce the headache rather than figure out why I'm getting headaches in the first place. And then we get into the scenario where now you're treating symptoms of side effects rather than the root cause. And we get so far down into this rabbit hole of treating side effects of side effects, we almost get stuck in this spot where you can't get out of. So how does someone like take the first step into rewiring their brain to figure out, is this physical? Is this mental? Like, where does the first step in that process look like for someone?
Right. And you've made a very good point here where you've talked about you go after one thing and then another thing pops up, right? So that is an actual, I call it's whack-a-mole symptoms, where you're kind of whacking one and another comes up. Oh, my, IBS is coming up. Oh, now I've got a headache. Oh, now I've got a neck ache. Oh, my shoulder, that frozen shoulder is coming back. So if you start to notice you're playing whack-a-mole, then you've got to step back and say, could it possibly be physical tissue in all of these areas? And then you've got to step back and say, wait a minute, is something deeper going on here? Usually the best way to start is start to make your own kind of evidence sheet of all the different things that have popped up in your life. And then next to that evidence sheet, the time frame of what was going on in your life at that time. Were you under a great deal of stress? Was there a breakup? Did you lose your job? Did someone you love get diagnosed with a serious illness? And then start to see, are there some correlations between these flare-ups? And then once you start to make that evidence sheet and you start to realize the connections, it's almost as if you kind of unlifted the veil on it, and then you can start to see, oh, this is why this is happening. I could tell you one from my own personal experience, if you would like to hear. So my husband and daughter were in a terrible car accident, and I was on the phone with my daughter when it happened, and they were rear-ended at 90 miles an hour by some street racers. And so I was on the phone when it all happened, and I could hear everything and the police coming, and I got to the scene and I rode in the ambulance with our daughter, and it was serious. She suffered a brain bleed, was in ICU, and traumatic event. Come home, she gets out of the hospital, she, covered with bruises, has a brain bleed, is lying on our sofa. I'm walking down the stairs and I see her on the sofa down there. As I walk down the stairs, my back seizes up so tight that it takes my breath away, and I kind of let a gasp out. And my daughter, being the 11-year-old at the time and completely cheeky and hilarious, says, "Mom, you weren't even in the car." And, we're laughing, and I'm like, how can I be having back pain? She's the one that, just got out of ICU. So roll it ahead about a year later, she is at a school event. It goes terribly awry. It's very unpleasant. She leaves this event and calls me on the phone and is distressed. I am on the phone with her in the kitchen where I had been on the phone before, and my back almost immediately seizes up in the exact same spot. Now, what is happening there? is that just my brain saying, as a mom, I can't take care of my daughter. She's in distress. Let's, seize up her back at this moment. But once you start to realize these connections that happen, then you can kind of take the veil off and say, it's fine, I'm okay. And then you can start to give yourself messages of safety. I hear you back. You're just upset because I can't take care of this girl right now, but she's okay. I'm okay. It's going to be okay. So it's how we deal with that. Now, if I ran off to the chiropractor and said, quick, help, then it sends me down another way. But if I just give myself some messages of safety, that can help with that rewiring. And a lot of somatic practices can be helpful to kind of retrain us and get us out of that, fight or flight and that stress mode. But it can be done, and within a fairly short period of time. There was a great Boulder study done where they took back people who had back pain for 10 years or more. 10 years or more, think of this. And 75% of them in 1 month had zero back pain by just learning these somatic practices and having an education that it's not the tissue is not the issue. So it is stunning. Migraines are something. IBS, long COVID, they're talking about, could be a mind-body connection. POTS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, that we learn these neural pathways and we need training on how to unlearn them and learn more beneficial coping mechanisms.
Right. So they just kind of get created along the way as almost an unhappy consequence of whatever the scenario is, a little unintended side effect. And then they just become part of our subconscious where it just continues to live on if we don't identify and address it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fear response that moves into our primitive brain is reacting to everything as, the saber-toothed tiger. But in this world we live in now, with our phones, we can, in an instant, be put in a state of fear, or we can have a boss, who's coming down on us and we're worried about our capacity to care for our family. There's so many things that can stimulate that fear response. And then once it's learned, just like Pavlov's dog and the bell and the salivating, we get into those learned responses and we can unlearn them.
When you mentioned, the year later, you're still feeling that same back issue from, your daughter. My question at the moment, and I'm thinking even more so now, was, are there people who are experiencing different symptoms, mentally, we'll call it, from issues that have happened 15, 20, 30 years ago in their childhood that maybe they just have never identified or addressed as the root cause of that? They've just assumed, hey, this is my normal life now. I have such and such stomach issue or back issue, whatever it is. But ultimately, if they were to kind of to do the detective work and figure out there is some unresolved trauma that I have not identified and let go of, that's actually causing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I hate to say it, but if you've heard of that ACEs score of the adverse childhood experiences, you can take a test, or it's just 10 questions, but people who score higher on that ACEs score, say you've lost a parent, or there's, drug abuse in the household. Essentially, it's if you had rough things happen when you were a child, those people are much higher risk for developing chronic pain later in life. And then you have to, as a detective, as you said, or a scientist, look back and think, what were the coping mechanisms that I needed in my household? Maybe it was a bit volatile and I learned to suppress my emotions and not say things so I could fly under the radar. All of that conditioning is like that Pavlov's, bell, that we then take those and bring them up with us. And so they can be maladaptive. And a lot of it can be that we're trying to suppress things. A lot of people have much higher chances of having chronic pain if they're perfectionists, they're do-gooders. There's a lot of personality traits that put you at a higher chance of having migraines and, other chronic pain circumstances. So you're absolutely right. I know it's not something people want to hear about, that all the learning from our childhood can still carry with us. And we pass it on to our children as well, right? So it's up to us to try to unravel that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, it immediately makes me think back to the, reaching for the Tylenol bottle as, your first go for people who don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that, hey, this thing that you're experiencing might be deeper rooted. They just want to go for, hey, what's the over-the-counter quick pill I can swallow to get rid of the pain now? And they'll continue to take that pill every day if they have to, rather than do the detective work to address that deeper issue. So, it definitely, I think, having conversations like these, which opens people's eyes to the fact that this is a real thing, and there are other ways to deal with this if you don't want to live a life where you're stuck with back issues, stomach issues, arm issues, whatever it is, as your normal. Hey, if maybe you take a couple days, have a couple conversations, and I don't mean to overly simplify it because it's deep work and it's uncomfortable, right? But if you go through this process, it can sort of free you from having to live the rest of your life like this. And, again, I think for a lot of people who get stuck living this way, it becomes sort of this downward spiral where now you're treating symptoms of symptoms because you've never treated the root issue. And, I think having conversations like these, which opens people's eyes to different ways to progress. There's, I'm sure, a ton of people who experience this but don't know how to identify it.
Yeah, chronic pain is a huge problem. And then also chronic anxiety and depression. It's debilitating, and it can, ruin families, lose jobs. And if you think just the Tylenol, think of antacids. So how many people are living on those? And we know physically it's not good for your stomach over a long period of time to have that. Then we move into other things of numbing, with alcohol, numbing with weed. I didn't sleep well at night, so I need my coffee in the morning in order to function. So I call that the trifecta of items that we're using. And it comes down to, what are we trying to numb? And a lot of it is the chatter in our mind. Our anterior cingulate gyrus. Dr. Daniel Amen talks about it's like having a little mouse on a wheel in your head that keeps running and running. Have you ever gotten like thoughts stuck in your head and they keep going? Well, he teases that a lot of people have that overactive part of their brain, and they want to numb it and get that mouse drunk, get that mouse high, so it can be quiet for a minute and I can just have a little peace. But we need to use methods that can give us lasting peace, that don't have a negative knock-on effect, if they fall out of balance.
Yeah. I noticed before when you were talking about your back pain on the phone, you almost spoke directly to it, to tell it to go away. Is that a normal common practice that you can essentially talk to your pain?
100%. Just have a gentle little conversation of like, oh, I see you there. I see you're trying to, get my attention. What are you trying to tell me? Am I a little too stressed out? Am I moving a little too fast? Do I need to take a little time out? Have that little reset to give yourself a moment. Do I need to just go outside? Take 5 minutes just standing under a tree in the front yard and looking up towards the sun to just be like, okay, what are the clouds doing right now? What are the leaves doing right now? Give myself a little reset. But yeah, that little internal chatter, a lot of the time people have a really aggressive, hard driving, like drill sergeant in their head, people who struggle with chronic pain. So how can I get that drill sergeant to kind of take it down a notch and give me a 5 minute reprieve, and so you can reset? And often our pain is something that is calling on us, that we're out of balance. How can we get back in balance?
Is that the same sort of thing that you can do for anxiety or that sort of pain? Because I'm thinking as someone starts this process. I'm just thinking as someone starts this process, it can, I'm sure, feel overwhelming to have to address or bring back up the things that they think they've sealed off in a box from 30 years ago. Can you then do that same sort of thing with those to get through that initial, over the initial hump where you can start to make some progress?
Yeah, the good news is that you don't have to completely stir the pot to get relief and get to the other side. Sometimes just awareness of it. Sometimes writing an unsent letter, how, say you had a bullying situation in elementary school, writing that letter down, don't have to send it, but getting it all out and then giving yourself the compassion that nobody gave you at that time can do a world of good. And then shred it, burn it, moving on from that. But both anxiety and depression can be a learned neural pathway. And there isn't that there aren't physical things that we need to make sure are okay as well. You have to make sure your vitamin D is not bottoming out. So there are certain things we need to make sure physically are fine. But once you've created that neural pathway that can go to the familiar feeling of anxiety, we need to start making calm a familiar feeling. And we're going to have stress in our life, but we need to learn how can we deal with that stress with a new neural pathway that's more, positive and doesn't send us into fight or flight all the time. And a lot of that is that internal chatter that we can give ourselves and having that awareness and education of it.
Well, I love that. That's certainly given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure has given a lot of people a lot to think about when it comes to the experiences that they're feeling and what real life is for them. Because for a lot of people, they've created this version of reality where that's their normal. They're in pain or they have these issues where they think, oh, hey, it's just because of X, Y, and Z that they've associated it to, because they don't want to do that work and get over that initial hump. So, I fully believe that you've given people permission with this conversation to feel those feelings, understand what they are, identify those, and then let them go to live a much better life. Now, the work that you're doing and having these conversations, I believe, frees a lot of people into living like a really authentic and joyful life. So, before anything else, I just want to thank you and honor you for doing that, because I'm sure people look at you like you're crazy sometimes for bringing this up because it's not talked about as normal. But again, just honor to you for doing that and continuing forward with that, because I believe it's a conversation more people need to hear.
Yeah, I feel like, and I'm so grateful when I read about your story and I've heard your podcast, I'm so grateful you're actually shining a light on how we've been given rules of what success is. And, we beaver away and we work, and then we get to the top of the mountain and we wonder, is this it? And then we realize we've burned down everything else that was important to us. And then maybe we're doing well in one area, but the other places are struggling. So we have to figure out how can we bring that level of joy and happiness and connection. I think a lot of the things that are conditioning now is that we're lone wolves, do it by yourself. But even our Surgeon General has said that isolation and loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, most people would not smoke 15 cigarettes a day, but they will work alone in a room for 15 hours in front of a computer and not give themselves a break or that connection with family, friends, other like-minded people. So I appreciate you for getting out there and saying, hey, we got to think about what's our definition of success.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. It's to be truly successful, I believe you have to be operating in excellence in all areas of your life. Not just, yeah, you have a successful business and that makes you a successful person. If you arrive to that business every day with this back pain because you have this existential dread of hustling and grinding for the next 9 hours to try and, pay all your bills. So having these conversations that I believe allows people to be their most successful self because they are at peace. They have joy. They're not in pain. They're not, under anxiety. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. It's the thing that I've struggled with. And having conversations, doing this sort of work where you realize, hey, maybe it's something else other than whatever the world tells you it is, where you need to take a pill to get rid of it. Like, do a little bit of uncomfortable conversation with yourself. Surround yourself with some people who are going to open your eyes to the fact that you don't have to live like that. And, you can actually live a much more holistically successful life where you are full of joy and gratitude, and you can wake up every day feeling great, and you can have fun, and you can spend your entire day doing things that you're not sure if you're working or playing, because you've created this life where you get to do all these things that you truly enjoy. And to me, that's what success is. And feeling great and feeling pain-free and feeling joy, I believe, is a large part of that.
100%. It's so interesting you mentioned gratitude because I wrote a book on happiness back in 2011 and last chapter's on gratitude. And of course, the gratitude journal. And then, of course, after the brain injury, I got studying, how to heal a brain so it can, come back from an injury. And then I've seen scans of a fearful brain and then a grateful brain. And you can actually see gratitude in a brain scan. And so that book back in 2011, I was actually rewiring people's brains without even knowing it. And you think about, with your children, how we spend our days and how we are conditioning them. Do we only give them, our love and attention when they're performing? Do we sometimes just say, hey, let's go lie on the grass and look at the sky, for 5 minutes? Can we teach our kids how to downshift and just be? Because we're constantly doing, and they're watching us going, I have to do in order to get approval as well. So it starts with us and how we start to set that tone. And by you having that half a cake, you have shifted, I'm sure, just the tone and how you're making an impact, not only in your own home, but everyone who knows you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, much to the same way we've had this conversation, that night was pain for me, right? I felt a lot of pain in that moment, realizing like, hey, I'm not the version of success that I believe I am, and taking a hard look at the things that I was intentionally ignoring because they weren't successful. I had this vision of what I was, and, to come to grips with, hey, I'm not truly successful. I've failed at a lot of things. Now I've been able to take that and use it for good, and use it to actually not only improve my own life, but, I like to think the lives of people who listen to the show or who I interact with, to give them a different perspective to then take that experience of pain and translate it into a positive. So, I agree. I think we can take these experiences if we are willing to do a little bit of self-work and use them for not only good for ourselves to remove the pain, but to bring joy to other people. And I believe that's a lot of our responsibility here, is to help other people live their best life and not just operate in a way that, I wake up, I live a life, I go to bed, I check the box, I live today, do it again tomorrow, but to really show up and be grateful for the opportunity to show up and to have conversations like this, right? To meet new people, to talk about things that expand your brain a little bit, to learn, to be better every day, and enjoy the process is, that's success to me. It's having things like this where you can live a better, fuller, more joyful life without having to resort to pills or to drugs or to whatever it is to kind of numb yourself through checking the box for the day, but really look forward to, hey, I don't have to, I get to. And, I think this is such a big part of it.
100% agree. I'll ditto right back at you on that.
If there were one thing where you can give to someone today, one either tip or maybe a mentality or a perspective where they can have a slightly better day today, what might that be?
I would say learn self-soothing. You need to learn how you can make yourself feel better when you're kind of spinning out. A super, super simple way is havening. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a bilateral stimulation. If you've heard of tapping or EMDR, this is a way you can just do it by yourself, and it can completely reset your nervous system. And so you're in a stressful situation, you're going to the dentist, or you're about to give a presentation, just rubbing your hands back and forth, thinking of a warm fire can reset your nervous system. And then you start to think about your breath and just simple things like that. Rubbing up and down your arms like this, it sends a message of safety to our brain. And what is anxiety, depression, stress? It's this feeling that we have no safety. So we have to constantly be thinking, how can I let my brain know I am safe? And this is just a simple way you can do it. So if you start to get a little win, big changes, as you know, come maybe with a big realization you had on that day, but after that, you probably started making small changes that led up to a change in your life over time. So if you could, yeah, just get those little tiny wins and then you just start building on them. And next thing you know, a year later, your life is looking a lot different. And so take little teeny tiny steps just again and again, and that will get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that. And just to even hammer that point home, that experience for me was 5 years ago, 5 years and a month. I'm a dramatically different person than I was 5 years ago. I'm a different person than I was a month ago. And the goal here is to continue to be that every day moving forward. And I really just want to emphasize that point because I think a lot of people think you sort of get to the spot where you become successful and now you're good. You've sort of reached the pinnacle. And that's not really the case. It's a continued journey where you are every day when you can look back on, hey, I am a better version of myself than I was a month ago, a year ago, even yesterday. And it could be a 0.00001% increase, but those add up. And you can always find a way to see the improvement in yourself if you look for it. And I think that goes back to what you talked about with gratitude. And I even think just the process of looking for something to be grateful for in and of itself will have you being better than you were yesterday. So I wanted to emphasize that point because I believe that gratitude and intentionality are a huge part of becoming the best version of yourself.
I would agree completely. I know when I started my gratitude journal, it took about 3 weeks, but after about 3 weeks, you realize, wow, I am spending all day, every day looking for something to be grateful for. And it just changes the quality of your life. And that, again, something that's wonderful to do with kids, have a gratitude jar. Let's all write our things and we just put them in the jar, and on Sunday, we'll read them all out. So there's lots of little things we can do, costs no money, but can change the trajectory of your day.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, and I just again want to honor you for the work that you do and the person you are, because I appreciate it, and I'm sure that a lot of people will live better lives because of what you do and how you show up. So again, thank you for that. I tremendously appreciate it. Is there any way that we can support you moving forward?
No, yeah, you can find me. I'm Natural Brain Solutions. You can find all my stuff there. Click through. I'm sure you put a link in the show notes if you want to find out more things. But essentially, your greatest gift to me is just say to yourself, tomorrow can be better than today, and then start to make those little changes. And if you need support from anyone, just reach out and start making that call. Friends, family, maybe it'll be a coach or maybe it'll be a therapist, but just start investing in yourself because we need you at your best. And so you are worth it. And so, yeah, take those steps to invest in yourself, and then we can all enjoy the better version of you down the line.
I love that. Couldn't agree more. Thank you again.
No, it's my pleasure. Take care.